Hey, welcome to Section 7, Understanding the Future in Opportunities for Real Estate. I want to keep this very brief. Let's examine the residential market and the four food groups of commercial real estate: multifamily, industrial, office, and retail. Once again, for simplicity, we'll use another analogy, this time of a steam engine train representing our economy as it relates to real estate. At the front of the train is the government of Canada. It's the locomotive that runs the economy, and the engineer of the train controlling the freight and its crew. Next to the locomotive would be the Bank of Canada, acting as the conductor, governing its speed and providing fuel for the train. Then, in order of economic momentum, most easily affected by government policy will be residential real estate, multifamily, and then industrial, office, retail, hospitality, and so on until you reach the end, the caboose. As of March 17th, this train came to a dangerous screeching halt, and it will take a long time for the momentum of a very heavy train to get back up to speed. As each boxcar sequentially starts to move, the pull effect from each car before it will help accelerate the next, just as each preceding sector of the real estate industry will help the next in the chain. For example, the sale of homes will lead to the manufacturing of materials. Accelerated manufacturing leads to the demand for higher or more industrial property. The administrative jobs in office properties, then spending for retail, and so on. So assuming the government of Canada will keep pumping money into the economy, what consumer behavior can we expect to drive demand that gets this train rolling again? Well, that's going to be the topic of Section 8. It's a concept that I really want us to understand and grasp. It is the flight to quality. So stay with me through this next concept. It's a good one. Hey, this is Mel from CRE NEXT. Work out loud. Brought to you by Paramount Real Estate Properties, specialists in occupancy and investment solutions in the Toronto West market. I want to welcome you to this next section in a series called Unlocking Opportunities in Commercial Real Estate Post-COVID-19, where we take a comprehensive look at the impact of the pandemic on real estate strategy for the Greater Toronto Area. If you haven't already done so, I'd encourage you to watch previous sections by clicking the link right about here. And if you're watching this series again, feel free to move forward by clicking right about here. Please make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell below so that you don't miss any new content as soon as it's released in the future. And now, let's get to the good stuff. Hey, welcome to Section 8. We'll call this one a flight to quality. Given our 90-day experience living in a pandemic world, many of the lessons learned from COVID-19 will influence how people rethink and reshape their lifestyle choices. 2020 will be themed as a flight to quality. You might have heard this concept before in the past, as consumers realign their needs once again. Note that people will shift renting from independently owned condominiums in favor of institutionally owned and professionally managed apartment buildings. Why? People will want buildings with a great sanitation and maintenance program and avoid those buildings which allow for short-term rentals of Airbnb. The idea of having transient next-door neighbors or visitors could be perceived as a health and safety risk to permanent residents. Owners of rental condos will be immediately affected by the temporary collapse of Airbnb bookings and can expect their investments to take a hit in revenue over the short term. Their only saving grace is that up until March 2020, demand for apartments outpaced supply. So perhaps the new space freed up by vacant and furnished Airbnb suites will afford renters to migrate to better condo options in better managed buildings. Furthermore, expect people to pivot from the higher density, high-rise residential towers to the next best affordable alternative in low-rise townhomes or semi-detached homes to steer away from crowded elevators, shared common areas, and shift towards calmer, more private backyard settings. Those housing options that include a den or a home office will have greater appeal for those now living permanently in this gig economy. Keep an eye out for industrial logistics and warehousing, trying to get as close to the urban core as possible, especially when it comes to the last mile delivery of product. You'll see demand for even the smaller size properties get absorbed to meet same-day or hourly delivery demands from consumers. Large office tenants will consider adopting a fragmented, decentralized strategy, spreading out their workforce so as to accommodate new protocols for physical distancing. This could mean alternating teams of employees visiting the head office on a daily basis, or a migration to some degree back to the suburban market, which could save companies money, locate some employees closer to their home offices, and provide a wider workspace for healthier environments. Those smaller tenants might just opt for leaving the office towers permanently. Home-based offices will save money and offer a secure, healthier work-life balance. And lastly, retail property will continue to transform as more shopping moves online, saving retailers money by abandoning traditional expensive bricks and mortar storefronts. So that's what we can expect from consumers, a flight to quality. That is the effect this will have on different asset classes. In the next section 9, we'll drill down our focus on residential real estate and the opportunities that will present themselves this fall. So if you're a house flipper, seasoned house investor, or new to residential real estate investing, stay with me. This next section will be valuable to you. Aside from the impressive June numbers, demand over the first 5 months of 2020 has declined slightly over the last year, but so had supply in lockstep, as potential home sellers pull out from the market for many of the same reasons the buyers have. As a result, prices remain high for now. The best window for value may be to catch the deals early this fall and winter of 2020, when we better understand how unemployment affects future demand. The temporary shock from the corporate profit picture expected at the end of the summer will most likely cause a lack in consumer confidence and trigger a reflex in prices for homes to drop so that owners can keep up their chances to sell. As well, the CMHC's new stress test rules came into effect on July 1st, which will be sure to drive out some demand from first-time home buyers as they find it more difficult to qualify for a mortgage. Maybe that's why June looked so good. So in a nutshell, volume for purchases were tapered by Canada's unemployment rate, jumping up to 13.7% in May from 5.6% in February 2020, and is expected to rise above 15% by July or August of this year. The CMHC projects that the uncertainty of jobs in 2020 and a drop in immigration could suppress demand for housing by 9% over the next 12 months, and a drop in housing prices between 19 and 29% of pre-COVID levels. Now that's a pretty aggressive forecast, maybe a little too aggressive, but nevertheless, that's expected demand. What about economic conditions? Although it's expected that household income and disposable income will drop with lower employment levels, it was interesting to note household debt in the fourth quarter of 2019 declined slightly, implying a purchase could be a little more affordable should we continue saving at the same rate into 2020 and 2021. However, the CMHC is calling for household debt to rise above 200% by 2021. That would mean an increase from 2019 levels, where households owed $1.76 in credit market debt for every dollar in household disposable income. It now projects worst case scenario to rise well above $2. Also noteworthy, we are not experiencing an immediate wave of mortgage defaults as it happened back in the US in 2008. It's highly unlikely to be a factor as charter banks had already encouraged refinancing loans back in 2019 to help curb that risk. As a result, prime lending rates from the big 5 charter banks in Canada remain around historically low levels. There might be some risk in the secondary lending market, which could force some people to sell off their investment at a discount. But again, look for that to surface sometime in the fall of 2020. From the other side of the equation, the freeze on construction caused by the pandemic and the decline of active listings on the market lowered supply in sync with demand. So everything stayed relatively status quo for now. Supply won't wrap up again until all construction of new homes will be back in full swing. But keep in mind, most builders will take a wait-and-see approach to constructing. So don't hold your breath waiting for prices to come down. Not until after those new stress test rules take effect. According to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, the housing market will see a historic recession overall in 2020. We can expect housing starts in 2020 to continue its slide towards historic low levels. By as much as 51 to 75% is what they're predicting for the back half of 2020. For those new homes completed during the pandemic, expect prices to hold at February levels, but watch for those builders to ride out this temporary lack of demand by providing financing incentives, material upgrades, and free furnishings. In summary, if you're sitting on the sidelines with cash or have already been approved for a mortgage and looking to invest in a house, then the fall window opens up some opportunity for you. Even if you hadn't already locked in a mortgage pre-approval by July 1st, if you require insurance from CMHC, the stress test could have reduced your purchasing power by up to 11%, according to ratespy.com. Home buyers affected by the stress test should look around for a lender that works with Genworth or Canada Guarantee, the country's 2 private sector providers of mortgage insurance. You want to be ready for the fallout this fall 2020. Those deals are coming. So if you followed along up until this section, the next set of boxcars closest to the front of the train is comprised of residential condos and multi-family apartment buildings. The overall revenue picture for this asset class has been stable and strong throughout the pandemic. This is the sector that has the least amount of volatility and the most amount of predictability because it experiences low turnover rates from residents. Currently, vacancy remains in the low teens and in some cases, single digits downtown. Future demand for this asset class will grow as unemployment is expected to rise and the new CMHC's stress test underwriting policies took effect as of July 1st of this year, which are both sure to shift demand away from purchasing a home and towards renting. The future for best-in-class apartment buildings looks brightest, as rent collection among A-class properties in the urban cores has been strong. Between 85% and 95% of rent was received on time in April and May, averaging around $2,300 per month. B-class and C-class rent collection averaged slightly less, but hasn't yet suffered as much as was first expected. Rents in this older stock and in these secondary markets will slide in the short run, but bounce back from their average of just over $2,000 per month. With the government of Ontario postponing the processing of evictions, landlords have been encouraged to work things out with their tenants until the courts get back up and running again. This meant the landlord's ability to raise rents in 2020 would become difficult. But once that ban is lifted, we could see a temporary increase in supply as landlords remove unwanted tenants and others choose to move back home due to a lack of opportunity for work or school. In the long run, demand will outpace supply. Since it will take some time for new stock of rental units, that is newly built stock, to come online, anticipate demand for existing apartments and rental condos to grow steadily in the first half of 2021 as we ease out from this pandemic. Buyers are faced with new stress tests and immigration policies, and school is resumed. For those individual condo owners, their investment might take a short-term hit this summer if relying solely on profitable Airbnb revenue. Now might be a good time to convert that vacancy into stable long-term rental income from tenants seeking a flight to quality in apartments. Just remember to screen them properly and have rent collection through electronic fund transfer to avoid future problems. In the long run, demand will outpace supply. The National Housing Strategy encourages the increase in stock of rental units with insurance support from the CMHC. The Rental Construction Financing Project, which provides low-cost loans encouraging the construction of rental properties across Canada, was introduced with a total of $13.75 billion in available loans until 2027. Peering into the future, for those investors who can tap into these funds for the development of purpose-built multifamily, new builds will provide a greater upside return on investment over buying existing apartment buildings due to the long-term scarcity of supply. New apartment builds will fetch a greater reward over older stock, which currently only offers a return below 5%. It's safe to assume compression of capitalization rates will continue as cheaper money is available and more demand from competition will chase the limited existing supply. So let's build new. There is good news for existing building owners. Conventional lending remains available for strong performing assets in attractive markets. First and second mortgages are relatively cheap. However, access to this capital will be limited to those good operators with a long history of demonstrating success. More so now than before, loan-to-value ratios and costs of funds will differ with the strengthened covenant for each applicant. In summary, demand for condos and apartments will continue to provide great returns over the next few years, beginning July 1st, but especially picking up when immigration and students returned. If you've enjoyed these last two sections, you're going to love the next few sections where we uncover opportunities in industrial and office asset classes. Stay with me. Let's go through those together. Okay, we're back. So what about other commercial investment asset classes? Which has been the most resilient throughout this pandemic? The best of the bunch has to be the industrial buildings. This class continues to outperform. Prior to the pandemic, Canadian industrial assets enjoyed a 10-year bull run of growth. Rents have grown 100% since coming out from 2008. Vacancies throughout most of Canada, specifically Toronto and Vancouver, were absorbed down to 1% or so in availability. Net rents in these two markets reached levels above $10 per square foot. The pandemic hasn't seemed to impact lease renewals or sales due to the pent-up demand that existed before the March shutdown. The rise of e-commerce and the need for localized distribution will ensure demand will be sustained. Although Canada is not a manufacturing powerhouse, much of the industrial assets here serve mainly clean uses such as in warehousing and logistics facilities, catering to the consumption of products the market demands. Welcome to the all-delivery economy. With most retail shopping increasing online, twinning of real estate strategy between storefront bricks and mortar and industrial fulfillment centers will become more prevalent. Demand for industrial properties from this sector will rise for both big and small bay warehouses serving curbside pickup and distribution. As we continue to work from home, watch older industrial properties be converted into food commissaries for delivery of prepared food straight to the end consumer through delivery channels like Instacart, Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash, and Skip the Dishes. It will also be reasonable to assume short-term lease demand for industrial property could rise due to all the past winter and spring seasonal retail product needed to be taken off the shelves out of the store and into storage within smaller buildings. Some risks for landlords might come from smaller tenants. These occupiers of smaller bay-sized property are typically private local companies that don't possess the deep pockets of money to withstand a long pandemic recovery. On the flip side, large bay industrial users are typically national or international companies which possess the cash flow and banking leverage to endure a longer recovery period. Rent collection for these larger tenants has been seamless throughout April and May, above 90%. Even with a pause through this economic downturn and weakening consumer demand for products expected ahead, vacancies are only anticipated to rise from 1% to 3% at most. That's still quite healthy, and some would even say preferred. New supply had been delayed because construction was deemed non-essential. So rental rates won't come down for a while. Rather, expect landlords to provide short-term incentives for new leasing and cost averaging down the rents on existing tenants by blending and extending the rates on early lease renewals. Coming out from this pandemic, deglobalization is expected to be accelerated by the crisis. Looking ahead at U.S. foreign policy, the current administration will continue to promote companies fully producing their products back home. Any decoupling with China in favor of onshoring manufacturing could only benefit Canada's industrial property market. The pandemic has made countries rethink their strategy about protecting supply chains for critical goods such as medicine. Any domestication of these types of essential products will require more industrial locations spread throughout North America, benefiting NAFTA 2.0. For security measures, we might see redundancy in locations to assure backup in supply chains at readiness levels. So rather than advocating for just-in-time logistics, the philosophy might shift to just-in-case inventory. As a result, those cities centrally located for distribution across North America and those local properties tied to rail or near airports and have great access to highway systems will continue to have the greatest sustained value for investment over the long run. Continuing on with our train analogy, the back half of the train will lag along behind the progress of the rest of the economy. Let's talk next about the prospects of the office market as an asset class. When we speak about the office market, we must take into context that we're talking about an asset class that is not as influenced by needs, as in the family's needs for shelter, be it apartments or a house, and not as influenced by wants, as in consumers wanting the goods warehoused in an industrial building. Rather, we should look at the office workplace through the lens of it being a place for an organization's leadership in the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, creativity, and culture. It's a company's knowledge center for their brand. As we've come to learn through this crisis, the term workplace may have less emphasis on the place and more on the type of work function needed to be completed. All these attributes mentioned don't need to be centralized all in one spot in order for companies to grow forward. The last 90 days served as an experiment for this asset class where we know now that leadership doesn't need to be physically present at all times, and productivity could be maintained remotely along with communication and collaboration. This could pose a problem for the office market over the near future. Let me explain. On average, it takes us about 66 days or so for a new behavior to become automatic. Forming a new habit, in other words. Well, while under quarantine over these past 2, 3, 4 months, we've learned to become location agnostic when it comes to office work. We can be scattered and decentralized, but still work effectively as a team. Although not most ideal for fostering creativity and culture, Online meetings and presentations have worked quite well for those with strong internet connection. So well, in fact, that some companies, which can afford to work remotely, will try doing so almost permanently. Due to the pandemic, it's expected that a full office workforce won't be back until the fall or winter months of 2020. Schools and daycares hopefully will be reopened fully by then. So, how do you attract employees back to the office when there remains a residual fear of riding to work by train, subway, and public transit? How do you assure duty of care for your employees' safety and well-being? Will face masks be required? Will temperatures be taken? Will there be new protocols on contact tracing within the office? More thought and money will have to be invested by companies and landlords into stepped-up cleaning and disinfecting practices, bacteria-killing UV lighting, interior signage to manage flow of foot traffic, and the implementation of health and safety stations within a building. So expect layers of new operational costs to be added for both the landlord and the tenant next year. But then what happens to rent collection until all this gets sorted out? So far, April and May and June, rent collections for A-class office properties have been around 90 to 95%. But there is a real fear for what happens over the summer and fall months leading into the winter. Should these towers continue to remain relatively empty? Downtown office space will be spared somewhat from this crisis. The cachet of having a headquarters in an urban core will continue to help companies recruit new talent, achieve corporate marketing initiatives, branding, social and cultural initiatives. There is concern for small to medium-sized businesses that make up over 60% of tenancies in office complexes. These companies would be most impacted immediately by the crisis and feared to be the most vulnerable to leaving the office tower setting altogether or going insolvent should business not get back up to full speed by the third or fourth quarter of this year. So expect a spike in the number of subleases coming onto the market at that time, which should drive rents for B and C class buildings down by a few dollars as direct space from the landlords compete head-to-head with their tenant subleases. So saying all this doesn't mean the office ecosystem is obsolete. The location and design for the office workplace of tomorrow will need to adapt to include healthcare concerns of today. Otherwise, it's business as usual. Office isn't going anywhere. Companies aren't going to give up their space and tear up their leases. They'll just use their space differently. Downtown Toronto A-class office vacancy was as low as 1.9% not long ago in the first quarter of 2020. That should continue hovering slightly above that level as the owners of these buildings are mainly institutional with deep pockets to implement new health and safety protocols immediately, resulting in a higher retention rate of tenants for those landlords. From an investor's point of view, there may be less appeal for B and C class buildings. For these assets, owners might find it hard or prohibitively expensive to comply with regulations for improved ventilation or greater distancing between employees, thus making these assets less competitive. Because of the asset's age, these buildings will have difficulty retrofitting newer property technology for security, non-contact doors and hands-free elevators, keyless entries for suites, HVAC, filtration systems. The opportunity for investors and larger tenants alike might shift focus towards newer, low-rise office towers no higher than 6 or 7 stories. New design build for single-story flex office buildings for single-use tenants in the suburbs where there is more land, thereby avoiding the congestion of multi-tenancy and the need for elevators, might be more appealing in the future. This type of asset would appeal more for corporations mindful of health and wellness initiatives. Perhaps coming out from this pandemic, design build would be ever more ideally suited for office medical uses, government agencies, or adult learning schools, which all draw a lot of foot traffic and congestion within an office tower. In summary, we're experiencing an initial overreaction to a lot of how the pandemic will impact commercial real estate. The world will be changed less than may be expected from this crisis because humans are all creatures of habit. Human nature doesn't change overnight. We are all social animals and we'll get used to social distancing. There will continue to be demand for signature A-class office assets across the city in the long run, but expect it to take a short-term hit over the next 12 months until the third quarter of 2021 as companies reassess, recalibrate, and redeploy their office workforce. As an asset class for investment, I'm still bullish on office real estate for the long run. Companies will always need a hub for their teams and a place to congregate in person to exchange creative ideas and collaboration on projects. So I really hope you found the information over these last 12 sections valuable as a tool for 1, avoiding the coming pitfalls in real estate, 2, spotting future trends across different asset classes, and 3, revealing cues for timing investment decisions. In these last few sections remaining, we'll review the opportunities lie ahead for retail and then wrap it all up with our 12-point key takeaways from this entire presentation. Please stay with me as I really want you to walk away from this conclusion, shaping a plan for future real estate strategies. The grand finale is coming up next. I want to thank you for sharing your time with me. If you like today's content, press the thumbs up icon and subscribe to this channel. Send me your comments, good, bad, or indifferent, so that we can better shape future broadcasts. And don't forget to tap on the notification bell below so that you don't miss any new content as soon as it's released.